Hi, my name is Cynthia. Welcome to Bible Stories for Kids and Their Parents. Our story today: in the peaceful Garden of Gethsemane, under the twinkling stars, Jesus faces a night of deep sorrow. He asks his disciples to stay awake and keep watch while he prays, knowing that a great challenge is coming. But as the night grows darker, sleep overcomes them, and the betrayal draws near. Will they stay by his side when he needs them most? This is the story of a night that changed everything, a night of courage, faith, and ultimate sacrifice. But not just that, I also have a secret for you at the end of the video. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and like the video when it is finished. In the peaceful Garden of Gethsemane, under a sky filled with twinkling stars, Jesus and his disciples sought a quiet place to pray. The garden, with its ancient olive trees and cool night air, was a place of refuge, where Jesus often came to be alone with God. But tonight was different. Jesus' heart was heavy, and he knew that a difficult path lay ahead. Earlier that evening, Jesus had shared a special Passover meal with his disciples, a meal filled with deep meaning and love. He had washed their feet, taught them, and even revealed that one of them would betray him. Now, as they walked into the garden, Jesus turned to his disciples and said, "Stay here and keep watch with me." His voice was calm, but the disciples could sense the urgency in his words. The disciples, weary from the day's events, found spots under the olive trees. The night was calm, the air cool, and the garden was silent, except for the soft rustling of leaves. Though they tried to stay awake, their eyes grew heavy with sleep, and soon, one by one, they drifted off. The disciples, startled awake by his voice, quickly sat up, rubbing their eyes. They felt guilty for falling asleep, especially when Jesus seemed so troubled. They promised to stay awake this time, determined to support him as he prayed. Jesus returned to his secluded spot in the garden, once again kneeling down to pray. The night grew colder, and the garden was enveloped in a deep, almost eerie silence. As Jesus prayed, the weight of what was to come pressed down even harder on him. He knew that one of his own disciples, Judas, was at that very moment betraying him, leading a group of soldiers to the garden to arrest him. The thought of this betrayal by someone he had loved and trusted was almost unbearable. But Jesus also knew that this was the path he had to walk, the path that would lead to the salvation of all humankind. Meanwhile, back under the olive trees, the disciples once again struggled to stay awake. The night was so quiet, and their bodies so tired, that despite their best efforts, they could not keep their eyes open. Slowly, they drifted back into sleep, their breathing soft and steady as they lay on the grass. For the third time, Jesus returned to his disciples, and once again, he found them asleep. This time, he did not wake them. He stood there for a moment, looking down at them with a deep sense of sorrow. They were his friends, his companions, but in this crucial hour, they could not stay awake with him. Yet Jesus understood their weariness, their human frailty. He knew that soon, they would face their own challenges, and he prayed that they would find the strength to overcome them. As Jesus prayed for a third time, the night grew darker, and the sound of footsteps echoed through the garden. Judas appeared, leading a group of soldiers. With him were torches that flickered in the night. Judas walked at the front, his face a mixture of resolve and sadness. He knew what he was about to do, and though he had made his choice, it still weighed heavily on him. Judas stepped forward and greeted Jesus with a kiss on the cheek, a signal to the soldiers that this was the man they were to arrest. Jesus looked at Judas with deep sadness in his eyes, but he did not resist. He knew that this was the path he had to take. The soldiers stepped forward and seized Jesus, binding his hands. The disciples, now fully awake, were filled with fear and confusion. Peter, in a burst of emotion, drew his sword and struck one of the soldiers, cutting off his ear. But Jesus, even in this moment of betrayal, reached out and healed the man's ear. "Put your sword away," he said to Peter. "Those who live by the sword will die by the sword." Jesus knew that violence was not the answer, that this moment was not to be fought with weapons but endured with faith. As the soldiers led Jesus away, the disciples, overcome with fear, scattered into the night. The garden, once a place of peace and prayer, had become a place of betrayal and fear, yet, even as he was led away, Jesus knew that this was the beginning of something greater. The sorrow and pain of this night would lead to the salvation of the world. The story of that night in Gethsemane is one of sorrow, betrayal, and sacrifice, but it is also a story of love, faith, and the ultimate fulfillment of God's plan. Wasn't that an exciting story? Okay, so here is the secret I promised you. Did you know? Kangaroos can't walk backwards. Presence of a thick, long, and muscular tail keeps them from doing so. Be sure to like and subscribe. See you next time. Bye.